rather, the Bulluminati. I'm your host, Nathan Bond. Joined alongside me, as always, Seth Varnadore and Robert Steeg. I don't know by their faces if I'm lagging behind or you're just surprised that we're still doing this.
You lagged for like a good second there, but that was about it.
A little bit of both. Yeah,
it was literally like right when it was like, what? Podcast. So we're off to a great start.
And then I saw Eric's comment. And just took me by surprise here. Total shock.
We are off to a hot and running start here this evening, folks. We've got a jam-packed show, so a bit of housekeeping. So I want everybody to download and listen to the audio version of this podcast when it's released tomorrow. There's an interview with Ben Chase, who some of you may or may not know. He is the guy who is trying to get to 70 college football games this season. I think he had some trouble this evening with his car.
We killed his car last night.
Yeah, real Ferris Bueller. Oh my God, what did I do? You killed the car. Vibes going on, but he was great. He was actually coming back from the Florida FAU basketball game, so we had that to commiserate with terrible basketball programs, and we will touch on that here shortly. But it was about a 25-30 minute interview, Seth.
Yeah, just under 29 minutes, just under 30 minutes.
Yeah, so this is going to be a jam-packed show for the podcast listeners to get your treadmill time in, to kill some time at work. You'll know, all right, if I finish this, I'll be this much closer to lunch. That's just where you really got to think about it. But I'm going to open up to the floor for you and Steeg here, Seth. Where do you guys want to take this show here this evening? What is there one pressing thing that you want to talk about, and we'll get to everything else, and then we'll go from there. It's the end of the season, man. I'm a little slap happy, and I want the season over with.
Do we want to talk about the SMU game now? Ben Chase brought some kids to that game. They got to experience the atmosphere live and the raucous crowd that attended. You want to talk about that game, recap it real quick, and then look to this week before we get into any coaching type stuff, or do you want to start with basketball? It's even more of a sour note.
Do you want to start with the worst or the worser? Yeah, we can recap the SMU game real quick. The highlights were it was 17-17 at halftime. Lowlights, the third quarter, the rest of the game were not great. But Brian Battie did rush for his third straight 100-yard rushing game. He's like 127-ish yards away from cracking that 1,000-yard plateau for the first time since 2018, when former running back Jordan Cronkite did that, buoyed by that 400-yard performance against UMass that year. That was pretty remarkable. So the good, probably the unfortunate, again, as the podcast title kind of lends itself, outside of crossover, the season from hell, could Travis Marsh done for the year. He broke his neck.
That was a shocker.
Neck surgery. I did not expect that.
That was a shocker to hear that, because we were watching as soon as it had happened, and then, there's something that ended up being funny. It was funny at the time as well, but not to do with the injury. But as soon as it had happened, we saw him move his hands, because he moved his hands to his head, and so he'd move his hands. And then when they were getting the board out, we could see him moving his feet. So it appeared like that the worst that is being precautionary. It wasn't terrible, right? Because he was still moving extremities. So to hear that he had to have neck surgery was a big shock.
It really was. I thought maybe it was just his second concussion in like a month, and that's always really scary.
I thought he'd be done for the year, kind of regardless, just because second concussion that quick. probably hold him out. But
yeah, it just the fact that it was as bad as it was kind of just kind of shocking and unfortunate for him. You know that he was okay in the first half. A couple of mistakes here and there, but my thoughts are out. I think he's out of the hospital. I think he had the surgery on Monday, and then he's from the hospital Tuesday afternoon. So he should be, back resting. Coach DePrado kind of described it as he's in good spirits. He's sending messages, video messages to the team, just kind of letting him rest, which is just super unfortunate. Steeg, I know you've always liked Trey. They thought he was we always thought he had a solid arm, but it kind of you didn't see it happen. You didn't see it happen live. You were kind of off in your own world. So must be a little bit jarring for you to kind of, get wrenched back in. You're like, oh, our quarterback broke his neck.
Right. It's the unfortunate part about this season from hell is that, the thing about these injuries is that, like, you have to remember that, yes, it sucks that you're now, what was your backup QB, your starting quarterback is out. You also have to remember this 20-year-old kid just broke his neck. And, like, thankfully it wasn't, a bad injury. I mean, it was to the point where I was looking at, I checked Twitter every once in a while I was on vacation just to kind of see what was happening in the game and everything, but I wasn't, dial in too much. And then just everything stopped. Like, when I think the last tweet that I think I saw was from you guys talking about, the stretcher coming out, and, like, my heart sank. I was like, damn, like, not just like this season is like being the way it is, but like when the stretcher comes out, like, that's a scary thing. Like, that's schools take precautions on this stuff, but, like, you don't just, Jim got a stinger, like, well, let's, throw the stretcher on or anything like that. And then, like, to hear he was going straight to TGH, like, just the heart sank. Cause I mean, Trey's a phenomenal dude. Kid even is what I'll call him. For him to, decide to come back to USF because he believed in the coaching staff and, wanted to prove that he's a more serviceable quarterback than the stats were leading many to believe. And he was doing that. I mean, he was really helping himself out this season thus far after being thrusted into a position that probably at the beginning of the year he didn't expect to even probably play that much, and then to be thrusted into that starting role and to for lack of a better term, to thrive for a little bit. It finally felt like a good story was happening for USF, and then just went crashing back down to reality. So yeah, that was where I was at. I mean, I had to I logged off Twitter after that because, like, I read what happened and then I read Stretcher and I was like, too much negativity around a 20-year-old kid. I need to, game's over at that point. Anything after this is just going to be continuously not great to read. So I was like, I'm out. So I deleted Twitter off my phone and I logged out of it. So that's where I was at with that. I was like, well, because I mean, we're on the subway, so, like, I don't have any other social media to, like, scrub through. So I did went through, like, every Instagram story for the first time in a long time.
Well, the way the season was, and I liked when situations are sad or tense, I like to go to humor.
Same.
And so I turn to Nathan and I'm like, man, it's going to be something when the ref comes back on and says there is no foul for targeting. And that's exactly what happened. They pull a guy out on a stretcher. The ref comes back out and says, after review, there is no foul for targeting. And
which, I guess, by all accounts, it technically wasn't targeting. I never watched a play again from
I didn't
some of our mentions. They were saying it was basically a shoulder hit him kind of issue. And the thing about Trey is, he went into the portal after last season and then he came back and basically, I mean, he made Timmy's job a lot less secure coming out of spring practice. I mean, Timmy did it to Timmy, but also Trey had a really good spring game. and it was going to be a legitimate fight for QB1 heading into fall camp before Gary Bohannon transfers in. And then once Gary transfers in, it's basically a two-man race, and Trey Marsh is relegated back to, all right, I'll be the backup for whoever stays at this point. So it's an unfortunate thing. He finally got a shot, and this is how it ends for him this season. DDP was positive in saying that it should be a full recovery. Probably going to get him on the DDP yoga and go from there. See, this is
snake.
Yeah, this is where I deflect with serious things with humor. That is it, folks. And you mentioned, Steeg, the offense kind of clicking. We'll touch on it as we preview Tulsa, but I'm going to rattle off like 7 or 8 teams real quick, and then I'll touch on it in a little bit. That's called what we call a teaser, folks. Minnesota, Iowa, Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Tulane, Notre Dame, Liberty, Washington State, and Louisville. Just keep those in the back of your mind as we move forward. Since we touched on the bad part of football, we're gonna go not in order. So we're gonna hit up men's basketball, and we are gonna discuss what's happened. USF men's basketball 0-3 for I would assume multiple times, but they're 0-3 to start the season. They lost to Southeast Missouri State to open the season, and then competed. And I think they were beating Auburn at halftime on Friday, end up losing. And then they lost to Stetson on Monday night. The Bulls are in year 5, I think, of Brian Gregory. The same issues are still present. They can't hit a shot from the field. They can't hit a three-pointer. They can't hit free throws. It's literally the same thing over and over and over and over again. I literally don't understand how this continues to happen. You bring in a kid like Tyler Harris, who shot like 40% from 3 at Memphis, and I don't believe he's hit a 3 this season.
No, he hit one.
Good for him.
Night. Yeah, he hit one.
I think he had a 15 missed streak going. Then he broke it.
This program is cursed beyond belief. At this point, just bring in Rick Pitino. If he can't do anything about it, then you know the program is absolutely cursed, and you just call it a day.
I will say these issues transcend Brian Gregory too. These
absolutely.
Like, and I know the blame is always going to fall on the head coach. It's evergreen. That's kind of the point. But like USF hasn't had a 3-point. I remember my first year at USF now 10 years ago. We didn't have a 3-point shooter. And I know the year before that.
Torlin Fitzpatrick is standing up and going, "What the hell, bro?" He was halfway decent, and then Reggie Cohn before him, and then that was basically it. I don't think Chucky Atkins really shot threes.
It's like USF hasn't had a good 3-point shooter, like an actual like above NCAA average 3-point shooter in ever. Like really, like. It's astounding. I'm fairly certain if USF decides to move on from Brian Gregory and goes into this, I don't even know what style of offense it was, but because I don't know basketball from left or right, but that style of offense where you just chuck threes, like the shit they do in like NIA basketball, where like guys can score like 98 points a game but lose like 210 to 197 or something like that. Like that's what USF needs to bring in, just to crush all the 3-point records and just to bring something back. But like, man, like those rims are just cursed.
Yeah.
For
if
USF.
you do go after Rick Pitino, I hear he handles his business very quickly. So turnaround would happen in a jiffy, I would imagine.
There aren't very many gentlemen's clubs in and around USF. You'd have to make that drive, and you know how everybody hates making the drive from USF to like South Elm Avery. So, we should be okay there.
Just for reference, USF is 190th in Ken Palm. The offense is 266th.
And there's
Defense
like,
has been kind of fine though.
Defense is 120.
365.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, but that's Brian Gregory's mantra.
Yeah.
Is defense. I mean, you brought in a guy like Tyler Harris, and I think his like, I don't know if they have like defensive metrics, but I'm fairly certain Tyler Harris's defensive metrics just skyrocketed, and then like his 3-point percentages just did the opposite. Like they kind of just flip flopped. But yeah, it's bad. It's funny. They have like some good pieces, and it's just not enough. And I have to stop there for a second because I was about to say something I shouldn't have. They have good pieces. They have like 3 or 4 at a time. It's just not consistent. And as much as we wanted to put faith that, you know, the CVI championship to NCAA tournament pipeline was going to come to fruition for USF, it got derailed in a way that no one kind of foresaw coming. And now we're at the consequences of, you know, eating a shit sandwich for basically 3 years. So I imagine, you know, unless we're looking at some sort of miraculous turnaround, because Michael Kelly, for all intents and purposes, is a very gracious and forgivable God when it comes to his decisions to fire coaches. You know, I'd imagine if it gets to the point where, you know, you're looking at an offer on, you know, the conference, or offer on non-conference, like you might have to just go ahead and bite the bullet on it. And you have 2 assistant coaches with previous head coaching experience. So it's not like you're leaving the cupboard completely barren that way. But you know, it's getting close to that time. I said it last year when they lost to South Carolina State that the program's not fine. I understand why you are giving Brian Gregory this chance. You know, at that point, like I get it. You can kind of see the pieces that he wants to put together, but it's the same thing with Jeff Scott. I mean, you can talk about the pieces that are in place. You can talk about, you know, the effectiveness of guys like Keyshawn Bryant at times, or how effective Ryan Conwell is, or even how well Brian Gregory's recruiting right now, because they're recruiting their ass off. But the product on the court isn't matching up to the standard of play that it should, and that's where you're going to lose faith. You know, like they got 3 commits, and all 3 of these commits are really good. Actually, no, they don't. Not just 3 commits. They got 3 guys signed to the program now. All 3 of them are very good. All 3 of them had really good offers out of high school and chose to come to USF. I don't think that USF needs a clean house. I think they just need a new head coach.
Interesting note. They're 138th in adjusted shot quality, 111th on offense, which is just like a pure looking at just the quality of the shots you take. But their rim and three-point rate, which is kind of like you want shots at the rim, you want 3-pointers, right? They're the most efficient shots. They're 212th in the country in that. So more shots at the rim, more threes. That's
not great. And, you know, Cyril Smith's dad went off on Twitter after the game on Monday in a since deleted tweet, said, "Trust me, it's time. You have real scorers on the bench and you carry on with this bullshit. ... Fire everything." If I didn't know any better, I would have sworn that was a Colin Sherwin tweet.
It's his burner.
Yeah, he's actually Cyril's dad. We just didn't know that. But God, man, you can't keep doing this crap. You can't, like, and at some point, you know, we're gonna have a referendum on Michael Kelly's job here. He's got a head coach to hire, and then he's gonna have to make a decision about Brian Gregory, and then this will be technically his first basketball hire. You can't screw the pooch on either one of these and think you're going to be able to retain your job or get to another place. Like, I know USF is kind of used as a stepping stone for a lot of people, and that's fine if you leave it better than you came into, right? And we're teetering on the brink here. Some of the infrastructure things are starting to get in place, right? They're doing a bunch of stuff. You know, I think, you know, baseball's getting the turf stuff. Softball's getting some stuff, tennis, all of the infrastructure things are taking place. It's just the winning on the I don't want to say the sports that matter most, but they do. I mean, men's basketball and football are the ones that drive the athletic revenue year in, year out. We are huge proponents of men's golf, women's golf, men's and women's tennis, but they're not bringing in the donors. They're not driving the traffic to this athletic program. You need these two tent poles, these two pillars to be at least halfway competent, and they have not been that way in years. And it's at some point there are going to be fans and big money donors and the companies that in the Bay Area that figure out they can do other things with their money. So this is where we're at with this program.
Right. And like I said, I don't think you need to look that far or that hard or that difficult to find a new head coach. Like, this isn't like the feeling that I'm getting, at least around from fans and around the programs as well, is that it feels like it's just the head guy problem at this point. I really liked Jason Slay. I think if they were going to pull the trigger on Brian Gregory, he would be probably the guy that's going to take over. He's had success at the mid majors basically his entire career. So, I don't think you need to look very far to find at least a serviceable replacement. Like, it's not like you're worried about Jeff Scott, like who the hell is going to be the interim coach at this point? Like, who's going to hold the team together kind of situation. I don't think it's too difficult of a decision. I know Michael Kelly's mindset on why those extensions happened and, his thought process behind them. It made sense. It makes sense, the good faith on the COVID stuff and, making sure that you're not screwing over your guys. I get it. They were department-wide extensions. This wasn't like a act of good faith. You've been doing a good job. You're winning games and everything like that. This was done as a way to kind of give the coaches back to for a difficult time. But, you have to, at some point, call a spade a spade. And USF men's basketball is in that situation where they're 0-3. They're still having the same issues despite literally Brian Gregory doing exactly what he needed to do in the offseason to fix the problems. You bring in a guy that's good on the free throw line. You bring in a guy that can bring up the ball on floor court press. You bring up a guy that's, good at shooting threes. And you're still bad at those three things. That's not on the players at that point. That's on the coaching. And that's where, the change needs to get made. Now, I'm going to give this at least until probably game 5 or 6 before I'm ready to throw in the towel on them, because I do want to give them at least the benefit of the doubt on improving and gelling a little bit more and finding the guys that can score a little bit more consistently. But you are really close to running out of that good faith, where normally I would give you until conference play, but I'm not even going to give you until conference play. Like, if they're 0-6, call it. Like that.
Yep.
There's no reason to keep them on the board at that point.
So they face Austin P in Tampa. It's part of the Sunshine Slam. It starts on Thursday, and then they travel up to Daytona. They'll face UAB on Monday, and then they'll play either Georgia or St. Joseph's on Tuesday before coming back for St. Francis College, Brooklyn. Sure, because that's absolutely a real school that's accredited for sure. UMass, Charleston Southern, at North. You're traveling to Cedar Falls, Iowa in December.
Is that that's Cedar Rapids.
Is that a bye game? It must be, right? Aren't they the team that went to the tournament a couple years ago? And it's probably a couple of years. It's probably been like 10 years at this point, and they beat Kansas. Like, they had that 3-point shooter.
What school is it?
Northern Iowa.
Yeah.
Yes, that is.
They do pretty decent.
Man, if that's a bye game,
they're 130. They're 131 in the old Ken Palm.
If USF beats Northern Iowa, and we see the John Rothstein tweet of Northern Iowa just lost a bye game to South Florida, pack in the fucking program.
The epitome
of brutality.
And
then he's been getting that run this year, by the way, already.
Bro, it's been bad. It's been so bad. College.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about USF men's basketball being bad all you want, but this is like everyone is losing bye games this year. Like, misery absolutely loves company. Louisville, I'm gonna double check this. Louisville has not won a game including their exhibition to a D2 school. Hold on a second. Let me double check this.
Do you think this is
Sure they're
because
0-4.
do you think it's because people are playing more high variance basketball now, where we're just taking it's a lot of jump shots, a lot of 3-pointers. So like if you get hot, you can kind of stay in any game. If you're cold, you can lose about any game.
Oh yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's basically college basketball in a nutshell right now. Yeah, they are 0-4. They lost to App State. So
Yeah, I saw that Louisville is 0. They've lost their last 4 games dating back to last year by 1 point. Does that sound about right?
Yep. They lost 66-67 to Bellarmine, who they just went up from D2 to D1 last year. They lost 72-73 to Wright State, and then they lost 60-61 to Appalachian State. Keeping in mind they lost to Lenore-Rhine 47-57. They beat Chaminade. I could have sworn that was a high school. I'm on their Chaminade Silver Wolves. Silver Swords.
That's pretty cool.
Bad. I thought it was Silver's Words for a second. Let's just take a venture on. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
Silver's Words. So while you do that real quick, I do want to touch on men's soccer. So they made a nice little run in the AAC tournament. They actually made to the finals. They lost to FIU, the host, who since making the leap to Conference USA, right? They're a CUSA team. Sunbelt, maybe, I don't know. They won the conference last year in whatever conference they were in. Won the regular season crown. Won the conference tournament. They get the automatic bid. But USF will play Hofstra in the first round. They'll actually be hosting at Corbett. I believe that's on next Monday, if I'm not mistaken. Of the first round of NCAA tournaments. The first time USF's been in the tournament since 2019, if I'm also not mistaken, or 2018. It's been a little bit. Steeg, I mean, you and I are both ready to fire Bob Uthorn like last year. Like we were so far out on him, and he finally was able to kind of put the pieces together. They don't score a lot of goals, but they play good defense, and they're pretty opportunistic. It didn't pan out in the conference tournament final. They threatened a little early, and then once FIU scored their 2 goals in the first half, they parked the bus, and it was over from there. FIU is really talented. They had an all international starting lineup, not a single U.S. born player. Like they know what they were doing down there, and you can't blame them. Go international, and you get to play in Miami. Yeah, sign me up.
It's the school's namesake.
Yeah,
and still play a high level of soccer. Yeah, sign me up. If USF beats Hofstra, I think they play the number 1 overall seed. I couldn't tell you who the number 1 overall seed is right now, but I believe it's
Kentucky. I'd have to double check the bracket, but yeah, they got the bad draw. Which, I mean, tell me if you've heard that one before.
That's some real women's basketball vibes right there, folks.
Right,
but
and they're not limited by regions either. Like they legitimately got the bad draw of the baddest draws.
So there's that.
Found this out. Chaminade University of Honolulu traveled to Kentucky. They also played. This is the best schedule I've ever seen in my entire life. Ohio State, Louisville, and Cincinnati. So they basically stayed in that tri-state area. So that's cool. Then they played Alaska Anchorage, and then the University of Alaska. And
do they host the Maui Invitational?
They don't. They host the Hoops in Hawaii Thanksgiving Classic.
Oh. I believe wasn't it Chaminade that beat like Virginia and Ralph Sampson way back in the day?
Yeah, like the biggest upset of all time, or something like that.
Yeah.
It was like the biggest upset in the history of like college sports. It was like Virginia was ranked number 1, and they played at Chaminade for like a weird thing. Like I think their coach at the time just wanted a vacation, and
makes sense.
They lost. Yeah, I mean, why else would you schedule this team
on the company dime? On the company dime, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like it was last year. Didn't USF played in Hawaii last year? Like absolutely schedule that. Absolutely schedule Chaminade. In fact, Chaminade representatives, if you're listening, I might be a free agent. I might be free agent when it comes to some basketball content. I'll rep it. Put me out there.
As Flying Hawaiian is pointing out, yes, it was the Ralph Sumpson Chaminade team that they beat, and they were the Maui Invitational host last year. I think it was like some COVID stuff, I believe, is what prompted that change last year, if I recall correctly.
I know my silver swords.
I still can't tell if it's silver words or what.
All right. We've made everybody wait long enough. Let's jump into football. Let's preview this Tulsa game. Your South Florida Bulls travel to Tulsa Friday night, 9 p.m. on ESPN2. Tulsa is 3-7, and they're 1-5 in the conference. And guys, I think if USF hadn't fired Jeff Scott, I think if the Bulls had beaten Tulsa with Jeff Scott, I think Philip Montgomery would be the first man out of this conference, because it has not gone well for them. We have called him Diet Lemon Booty for years and years, dating back to that 22-19 slop fest that USF won in that was 2018, right? I believe that was their last win of that season.
No, they beat UConn the week after.
Oh,
that was the Call of Duty week.
That was the had to recover an onside kick to beat UConn, which, in today's day and age where UConn's bowl eligible, it was a big thing for you new listeners. UConn used to be bad at football, and I know they're a big powerhouse now, but they used to be really bad at football, and it was embarrassing that you had to recover an onside kick to beat Tulsa, or to beat UConn. So there's that. God, this is such a bad game.
Interesting note here. So earlier today, I looked at the spread. It had gone up to 14. It's back down in some places to 12.5. So 13 in other places, but it's moving down off that 14. So some money came on the USF, it looks like. So
dead cat bounces.
That's interesting. Yeah. So
a delayed dead cat.
A dead cat bounces eventually. Yeah, it's this could still be the Philip Montgomery, ousting. Depending on how this game goes.
Right.
I mean, losing to an interim head coach, I think is falling on the sword to the most affectionate thing. But yeah, this is absolutely going to be the sickest game of the week. Like, this has to be.
Yeah, it's up there. This is what will be interesting here, I think, sneakily. USF has a top 50 offense in the country. SP Plus has them at 48. You can see here, EPA margin, they're 48. Rushing success rate, 39th. The USF offense has continued to be pretty good. Yeah, red does not mean good. I'm sorry, Eric. Red is quite poor. So you might have a little bit of a shootout here, which seems to be the only game USF can win would be a shootout. But yeah, I don't know if they'll win, but 14 seems like a lot of points, right? Am I the only one that feels that way?
It does, and no, it's a lot of points. This USF defense is so atrocious that it won't really matter how good the offense is. They're 131st in SP Plus this season, which is dead last in the country. And do you guys recall the names that I mentioned earlier? So yes. Minnesota, Iowa, Cincinnati, Wisconsin, Tulane, Louisville, Washington State, Liberty, Notre Dame. These are just some of the teams USF is ranked higher than in SP Plus offensively this season. As Seth, you alluded to, they are 48th in the country. If you had just told me that stat before the season, hey, USF's offense is going to be a top 50 offense in SP Plus, I would say, oh yeah, they won 7 games.
Yeah, because you didn't imagine that the defense could get worse than it was last year, and yet, as you can see by the deep
it
purple
is
here,
so much worse.
the deep purple here. Yeah, purple is bad in this one. Green is good. Offensively, you can see both offenses are pretty good. I think USF, Davis Brin is still the quarterback. I'm not sure if he's healthy. He had some injuries earlier, but he likes to turn the ball over. So I think defensively, you're hoping to get some turnovers. Offensively, the run game has been solid, and you can see against the run, Tulsa's not great against the run. 86 in total EPA, 83rd in EPA per play, 85th in EPA per game. So I'd imagine and I know we haven't talked too much about this, a new starting quarterback, a true freshman on the road, you'd probably lean on the run game a little bit, and that should be something that's successful for USF against Tulsa. So to me, this is a big time who wants to be there type game. Now, the weather being what it is, maybe that deters some people from wanting to be there. But I think USF likes they came out and played really hard in that first half. They just they just couldn't hang on offensively. This Tulsa team's not nearly as good as SMU. So I think if you come out with the same kind of verve, maybe you can get a lead in the first half and try to hang on. But I just think Tulsa, like you mentioned, their record in conference is pretty poor. I think they're on a 3 or 4 game losing streak, and they just seem to be getting worse. For the beginning of the year, their offense was lighting it up and doing pretty well. And now they're pretty bad. So I think you've got a shot here in terms of maybe you're the team that wants to be there a little bit more and really hungry for that win, where it seems like Tulsa's kind of ready to move on from the coach a little bit. And maybe that Q word comes into play a little bit.
Yeah. And just because this is astounding to me, just to go back to SP Plus for a brief second. So I looked it up. So USF's last 10-win season was in 2017. We all know this. Would you believe that USF's offensive SP Plus in 2017 with Quentin Flowers was just one spot higher than this USF offense in SP Plus?
Yes, because Sterling Gilbert was running that offense. You're telling me doing a halfback dive every play and a half wasn't an effective offense with a dynamic quarterback? I mean, we could talk about the affectionality of scoring 30 plus points a game for a while. It was like 25 straight games or something ridiculous like that. And then you scored like 12 against Houston and then like 16 against Tulsa to close out the year. So I believe that full on.
It was just it was remarkable to me to see that in print and writing. Again, it's so mind blowing how ineffective the defense was. And Seth, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we were kind of talking about how offensive guys may not be entirely the best at recruiting the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I think it's a different skill set. Like, I can watch a receiver and know within 3 plays if he's a dude. At least I feel pretty confident in that. I can watch a quarterback and kind of know pretty quick if the guy can play or not. I just remember when I was recruiting at the college level, our head coach played linebacker at Florida, played professionally. Coach linebackers is a really good defensive coach, Jerry Odom, head coach at Tusculum still. And I put on a tape of a linebacker. I didn't think the kid was anything special, but I thought he was good enough for us. He was a smart kid, so we'd be able to get him money and stuff like that. I threw on the tape for 2 seconds. He's like, "Nah, he's not explosive enough." He just needed to see 3 plays. He's like, "He's not explosive enough." And I was kind of like, "Really? Are you sure?" And I don't think that kid's done anything in college but long snaps. So he was correct. So, I think maybe, maybe it's tougher to identify sometimes the side of the ball you don't play on. It's easy to tell when a guy is a stud because everybody can see that. It's harder to tell, like, okay, look how look at his technique in this press, man. Like, this dude's a dog. He's going to be able to do all, I think it's a little bit harder to tell in that kind of stuff if you don't coach that side of the ball. And then we know that some, I think, in the football officers are a bit of size queens. So you may not be taking those guys. So you might have missed on some guys that were pretty good players just because they didn't fit the prototype. So, yeah, that was one thing I thought maybe that's a symptom of kind of the issues. Maybe the guys, what made me think of it is, I won't mention names, but you have some guys in the offseason that are getting blown up and talking about how great this player is. And then once the games start, you're like, this guy doesn't really do a lot. So why do they think he was the best? Why do they think he was the best guy on the team? He's not doing a ton when he's playing. So I don't know. That's where it makes me think maybe they're not the best judge. But then you've got some guys on staff that know what's up, I think. So it's just really, really bizarre.
I wholeheartedly agree. And so I was kind of looking over Toll's roster show, and genuinely shocked. Keelan Stokes is still playing. Also, it feels for like he leads the catches. He has 63 catches, over 1,000 yards down. He's always dude. He has been their guy. They've got a couple guys with more than 30 catches. Remember,
Nate, you are lagging a lot.
But that was
my goodness.
Tulsa's heyday,
Sounds like
I guess, quote unquote.
Robot speaking Spanish.
It's such an ugly game.
Speaking of ugly, that internet connection, Nate. Oh boy.
Am I lagging?
Oh, you were
like
lagging
crazy.
Big time. We caught like maybe 7.5 words total.
That's so weird. Yeah. Seth, do you remember the picture I had last time?
I don't recall.
Oh, y'all talk. I got to figure this out.
Steeg, you got any leads in the old head coaching search? Who's on your hot board? Who's your number one guy?
So after pondering on this for a couple of hours, I'm still big on GJ Kinney. I'm kind of moving off of the Jamie Chadwell train, not necessarily because I don't think that he's a good fit here. I think that Georgia Tech's going to back up the truck towards him. So I feel like we might lose out on that bidding war.
They may know that already too. It's the one good thing I thought, and I'll let you get back to your list. The one good thing I thought about them not being first to market, really, USF. There's some bigger jobs that were kind of first to market on some of these guys. Those guys might have a pretty good idea of where they stand in those jobs. So like Chadwell probably knows already if Georgia Tech is interested and if he's interested in them. So
right.
He might be able to tell, USF, hey man, I've already got something cooking. You guys can move on. I appreciate the interest. But
yeah, and that's kind of what I mentioned it, I think, in something that USF needs to call everyone early and often. Like this isn't like there's no worry about your phone plan or anything like that. Give a call to a few reach guys, give a few calls just to see what the market rate for your coaching staff is. According to Michael Kelly, they had a lot of guys reach out to him inquiring about the position, which isn't a total surprise for many reasons. I know that everyone and their mother probably thinks that USF is just this undesirable wasteland destination, but you get paid a lot. you're getting a brand new on-campus stadium built within the next 4 years, 4 or 5 years, and you have a very new indoor performance facility, and you have the entire university alignment at that point. So you're just kind of like, yeah.
It's a better job than it was when Jeff Scott got hired, and Jeff Scott was seen as a guy they couldn't get last time.
Right.
So it's a better job than that now. I'd say by a wide margin.
Yeah, and
So-
I will say this about the names that have been tossed around, and Eric kind of just touched on it as well. I wouldn't put these guys in boxes and categories, because we kind of have to remember that each one of these people are individuals with different backgrounds from previous predecessors. I know that, coming into the Charlie Strong era, or coming out of the Charlie Strong era, we kind of like, no more retreads, no more guys that got fired, no more of that. And then, we still kind of have that in the back of the head, and I see it all the time on Twitter. Don't hire Dan Mullen, don't hire Tom Herman, don't hire, these guys that have been fired recently. And then, on the flip side of that, yes, hiring Jeff Scott, a coordinator without head coaching experience, kind of worrisome and everything like that. I wouldn't put these guys in a box of categories and saying, oh, he's an offensive coordinator, he's not going to make it here because he doesn't have head coaching experience. These guys are all individual, and you can find instances like tenfold of a coordinator with no head coaching experience coming into a group of 5 program and being successful, and a retread hire. You don't really even have to look that far. You have to look 90 miles northeast to find a school who hired a head coach who recently got fired and was able to rebound and put it in there. I think we're looking, very unfortunately, at 2 exceptions back to back to what has been somewhat considered to be the standard. And then on the flip side of that, you don't want the big splash hire either, because we've seen so often that these big splash hires, the Scott Frosts of the world, like, sometimes the spotlight gets too big on those guys and the expectations are never met. And then it becomes even trickier. So I think at this point, you kind of have to just put the trust in the athletics administration. If there's a search firm, whomever it is going to be, that they're going to make the right educated decision. Like they're going to use those instances under Jeff Scott and Charlie Strong to figure out if this guy still has the fire in him, still can make decisions, still can, know the player management, know how to recruit. They gave the list of everything that they're looking for. Listen to them, because that's going to tell you who they're going to be looking for. And there's a certain guy on that list that is very much what they're looking for, but may not be the sexiest hire that you can possibly imagine.
Yeah, I think, I looking back on it.
And also, never read Matt Baker, have him blocked. I don't even know what he tweets anymore.
It never, yes, nor I. Looking back on it, maybe it wasn't necessarily the biggest detriment. Maybe for Jeff Scott wasn't that he had no head coaching experience; is more that he only had experience in one program. I think that's
Right.
something that's a little that, as we're starting to see, Clemson continually promote from within and not really get a lot better on offense. And you're seeing some Clemson guys go out away from Clemson where they've been there for pretty much their whole careers and not having a ton of success. I think that only being at one program kind of limits you. So like Jeff Scott really had nothing to look back. He could talk to his dad, which is a kind of a different circumstance a little bit, but it's not like he'd been in a bunch of programs and thought, okay, I want to do it like this, not like that. This is how they do it here. I want to do it this way. We did it this way at this school and did it this way at that school. All right, I'm going to pick a little bit from this, a little bit from that, and kind of make my own thing. It was kind of all right, this is how we've always done it. We had success. I'm going to bring it here. And that doesn't totally work. Sometimes it can, but, it didn't work here. And I think some of the blueprint was, unattainable here in terms of like recruiting. That's why I'm not really, I'm not super jazzed on anybody that's seen as a recruiter getting this job as their number one thing, because I think the higher end of your recruiting is capped for almost every candidate except for one. And he would be a tough one to get, it seems like. But I think the higher end you're recruiting is somewhat capped right now. And so it doesn't matter. Jeff Scott was seen as one of the top 10 or top 5 recruiters in the country. There's only so much you can do recruiting. I think it's got to be, to me, it's got to be a scheme-based hire. That's what I would do. I'm not in a position to be making the hire, but that's kind of what I would be looking for is guys with interesting schemes that fit the area.
Right.
So,
I mean,
yeah, I think you swing on you like you said, you swing on Chadwell, you swing on Dion. I think Sean Lewis is a really interesting one that I don't see a ton of people talking about. I keep adding names to my board. Some of them, I think some of the names I've added recently also ended up on the latest hot board from Will, if I'm right. Like Alex Atkins is a guy I added last week. Todd Monken, I think, is an interesting name, actually. Georgia's offensive coordinator. The coach for the Bucks, and he had some success at Southern Miss. Like he took them from a pretty bad team to a 9. I think they were 1 win or 2 wins when he got there, and he was 9-3 the year he left for the Bucks, I believe.
Right.
Garrett Riley's another one that was on Will's list today, just as you know. I think we talked about him last week, I believe, with Nick on Next Level. We talked a little bit about Garrett Riley as a potential USF guy. Not yesterday, but a week from yesterday. And then Phil Longo at North Carolina is an interesting name to me. A guy that's had really good offenses at a bunch of different places. He had, he was started or when I first saw him was at Sam Houston State, and they were really good. I think they won the national championship. Then he got hired at Ole Miss, and they were really good. That's when they had A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf and had some pretty good receiver rooms. And then he's been in North Carolina with Mac Brown, and you see what they're doing with Drake May at quarterback now. So he's another interesting guy, but some say maybe he's a head coach in waiting. But I think there's a ton of really good candidates. And like Steeg said, you don't have to limit them necessarily to guys that have head coaching experience. But my question would be, if I'm Michael Kelly, I think that a bad hire here sinks me. A good hire here keeps me on, right? If he knocks this thing out of the park and they're really good in football really fast and they move into this new stadium and they're really good, he's not getting fired, right? Like he's set. So he's got to nail this hire. And if he does, it'll be a really positive thing for him. But the question is, right, like if you have to nail the hire, are you going to go after somebody again that's not a proven commodity?
Right.
As a head coach, that's where, like, what's your risk appetite if you're Michael Kelly? Are you like, you know what, this is the guy, I'm going to be convicted and hire him? Or is it like, yeah, he might be ready, I'm not sure, I need this sure thing because I need to make sure that if they're close, I need the sure thing because I want to make sure this thing hits.
It's a lot like Survivor, which is what I wanted to talk about tonight, but we have to talk about stupid football and basketball instead.
I know. I got a question for you, and we'll get to. We didn't do predictions last week, and I had people asking me about the predictions, so we'll actually do predictions for this game.
Do you remember my prediction I gave you before the game?
Payne?
No, that's what I sent my dad actually. The young Mr. T. I said 45-21 before the game, but we didn't put it out there, so I won't act like. Even though I did say it, but
that's pretty good. A question for you. So Jeff Scott was, by all accounts, he was the right hire. Great recruiter at a very high level, top tier program. I know, Seth, you've kind of mentioned a few times you don't want another recruiter.
No,
is it that you don't want another recruiter that comes from a program that it basically recruits itself, or you just don't want another recruiter? Period. Say you can. Your prototypical G5 program, you can recruit to that. It's a little bit different than recruiting to like a brand like Clemson or Georgia or, Kenny Dillingham out there in Oregon. He's a long shot, whatever. But if you kind of understand the gist there.
I think more, I think recruiting to your style and to a smaller school is an attractive thing. But when you get guys like Del McGee's a name that's being thrown out there, He's been thrown out for a few jobs. He was a high school coach in Georgia, did really well, but he's known as a stud recruiter for Georgia. He hasn't called plays, I don't think. So he has high school coaching experience. Probably doesn't call plays. He's a great recruiter. Who does that sound like? Sounds like somebody we know. So like, I don't want if the first thing on your resume is this guy's a bulldog recruiter, he's a great recruiter. Like I think there's an upper limit on recruiting here.
Right. And it's not like recruiting is like this end all be all when it comes to USF football. Like realistically, unless this guy is just the worst recruiter and this head coach that we would possibly be going for, this guy is just the most unlikable. He's John Gruden 2.0. He's gonna hire a guy that will handle the recruiting and handle the scouting and doing all that stuff because that's what college football programs do. So I think when you get a guy that you don't necessarily need to get a recruiter. I think it's not like you're having to recruit guys to come to middle of Oshkosh, Wisconsin. You just need a guy who's somewhat likable, who's not just completely out of touch with the players around them and the reality that's going on around them. Just be likable. Just don't be likable, be a good coach. That's literally the two things that this head coach has to be, and he will be successful. Well,
and like roster management is somebody's talking about recruiting defensive linemen. That's the kind of a roster management issue, which, that's why, like, if you get a guy with head coaching experience, he understands how to manage, like, where I got to allocate my, my scholarships, right? So
yeah,
that's also something there. But I like you said, if you're like, this place sells itself a little bit, to a certain, if you have a guy in place, I think, and you have a style of play, but like recruiting to your style is important too. Recruiting and then developing guys when they get on campus. I think to me, identification and development is more important than being able to go in to like a 5-star house and land them, because I don't think that's realistic.
Right. And to the defensive line point, it also didn't help that you switched from having only 3 defensive linemen to 4 defensive linemen, and then 2 of your defensive tackles didn't even make it to, the first fall practice.
Yeah.
And then your 4 others are hurt.
But that kind of is what I mean by having identity and recruiting to that identity. Like, I know we're a 4-front team. We got to go get these bodies, or we're a 3-front team. We need to take as many. Well, when you switch back and forth, that's when you get some depth issues.
Yeah, it would have almost been better if they just stuck to the 3-3-5, but just took a different approach to it with a different coach instead of switching to a 4-3, because that's why they had to go so heavy in the transfer portal, because you only had, prior to the transfer portal, you had 2 defensive tackles, and both of them were gray shirt freshmen. So guys that didn't play football for an entire year. So like, no shit, they had to go to the transfer portal. You didn't have any other choice. Like, what are you gonna do? Throw out like God bless him because he's good, but like Jatorian Hansford, like having to do that, switch around your defensive line like that wasn't doing it. I mean, there were so many roster management issues, but it all started from just poor decision.
Where's our Desmond Watson?
He didn't make it to campus.
That's true.
That's tough. That's tough. Hate that for us.
We really recruited a guy that big and he didn't make it to campus.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Duh.
Actually, you recruited 2 of them. Neither of them made it to campus. Jesus. Fuck, we're the unluckiest team. I was telling that to the guys from the Golden Hurricast, which, by the way, that should be out tomorrow or Thursday. I went on the Tulsa show to talk about USF's comical injury woes and what was happening there. So a little teaser for you there.
Yikes. Let's wrap this up. Let's get out of here. We're going to do predictions here. You've got 1 in 9 USF, 0 for the conference, against 3 and 7 Tulsa, 1 and 5 in the conference. ESPN2 Friday night. It's going to be freezing. 9 p.m. The line is what, 12, Tulsa by 12.5.
Yeah, 12.5 some places, 13 some places.
Steeg, what you got for me?
I'm gonna eat sushi with one of my old buddies that's coming into town. This game doesn't exist to me. Sorry, Nate. No,
I'm still gonna need prediction. I'm still gonna
Yeah.
need prediction, Steeg.
Tulsa 38, USF 33. I don't know, something weird.
Tulsa. Wow. Okay. That's a lot of points to give to a true freshman quarterback on the road, but I dig it.
I'm also banking on like a Brian Battie kickoff return for a touchdown this year at some point. So
they got to kick it to him first.
That too. Maybe Jimmy Horn.
They got to kick it to him too.
The horn dog.
Gotta not pooch.
Seth, what about yourself?
Yeah, I'm gonna go 38-28 Tulsa.
38-28 Tulsa. Okay.
I'm a Byron Brown believer. That's the triple B.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna say USF gets Fetty Whopped 38-17.
That's in play.
By Tulsa. I love Byron Brown, but true freshman on the road at night in 28-degree weather. Yeah, they're not moving the ball they're not.
He's a North Carolina kid. Come on.
I'm sure of it, man. For sure. Real quick, MW, is it compliance or the coach that didn't make it to campus? It's not going to school kind of thing. That the campus.
Did Nate's thing cut out for you too, Seth? Or is that just
it
me?
did. Say that again.
Leave that. No, leave that. That was perfect. That was so perfect. Oh my god.
We'll never know what the answer was
until you guys.
Who knows what happened? Who knows?
You guys join our OnlyFans. Or...
You can also see the Air Bud cut.
There you go.
Oh boy.
Also, trick of time. I'm gonna answer that one real quick. Depends. We don't know yet.
Solid answer.
If the new head coach might say, fuck it, let's take our lumps and take some freshmen and run it this way and take a handful of transfers that can come in right away. It also depends how many guys leave, which, frankly, and I'm gonna knock on the wood here, no one's really left.
I think they are going to. Nate and I talked about this at the game. So the 30-day window is within the end of this. The end of the season is within the 30-day window.
Right.
So they'll probably enter after the last game, get some information, probably see who the new coach is going to be, then make their decisions. I would imagine that's what I would do if I was in their position and I wasn't quite sure. But yeah, they have the end of the season is still within that 30-day window they have to enter the portal. So I would imagine they'll play it out and then see what happens then.
Right. Exactly.
Oh yeah, Greenwald was suited up. He was just injured. He was there on. Yeah. The reason I tweeted out that he was not suited up is because I saw him walking out with the tight ends not suited up.
Yes.
So that's about it. Also, it's not Gunnar Smith at the backup quarterback. It's Ryan Bolduc, the walk-on.
Cardinal Mooney came for one.
The way that Daniel DePrado said as such was interesting. That's something to definitely keep an eye on. As he says, as of right now, Ryan Bolduc is our backup quarterback when there is technically another scholarship quarterback on the roster. So something to keep an eye on going forward.
Jordan Smith.
Hopefully also Jordan Smith. We are getting closer and closer to Steeg registering points at quarterback. No one's registered points in our fantasy league since the Bethune game, and I lost that week. So there's that. We haven't done the fantasy update in a couple weeks because, quite frankly, it's depressing. It's probably safe to assume I won just given what Petit and Weaver did over the weekend.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Once again,
but you guys want to know something funny? The college football playoff rankings just came out, and boy, abolished the college football playoff rankings in its entirety. Holy shit!
Go on.
UCF is ranked. UCF dropped a spot to 20th, and then Tulane's 21st.
Wait, what?
And NC State is ranked. This is the dumbest ranking I've ever seen in my entire life.
Did the top 4 change, or is it still Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, TCU?
It's the same. Tennessee's 5, LSU's 6.
Where's Bama?
USC 7,
8.
Alabama 8.
8 with 2 losses already?
Yeah, that's. Yeah, this is. They're playing the long game. They're playing.
Oregon dropped to 12.
Yeah, this is the long game of sneaking Alabama back into the top 4.
I think Tennessee's got them boxed out.
Yeah, they
Probably.
dead to rights. I mean, Tennessee's got what, Vandy and I think another
South
ass
Carolina. They're going to
Yeah.
crush both.
So
Although
Florida
very
State's
interesting.
19, UCF is 20.
Yeah, they have Ohio State 2 and then Michigan 3. Obviously, those are going to change because of the the rivalry game next week. But boy, does the college football playoff ranking just absolutely stink every week. Abolish this shit. Abolish the rankings, actually.
like, unless Michigan or Ohio State get absolutely blown out in that game, like, I don't see either one of them dropping out of the top 4.
It'll be interesting if one of them does lose by a similar margin to let's say Ohio State. It's at Ohio State this year, right?
I would venture to
If they
assume
lose
so.
by if they lose by like 2 touchdowns at home, how much worse is that than Tennessee losing by 17 on the road at Georgia? What's kind of where do you go there? Be interesting. The real interesting thing is one of them. If one of them wins the game and then one of them loses in the Big Ten championship, or LSU wins the SEC, would be a total wrench and everything.
It really would bring more chaos. All right, let's get out of here. It's gonna be like an hour and a half show for the podcast folks. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a long season. Take care of yourselves.
Friday game.
We have our weekend freed up, and then just one more week, guys. We can do it. Just one more week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for following along. For Seth, Steeg, I've kind of been Nathan tonight. Go Bulls.
Go Bulls.
Go women's basketball.